So one of my favorite games from a few years ago was Manhattan Project Energy Empire. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, this is Manhattan Project 2, which is a sequel to the Manhattan Project. That's right. Energy Empire is more like a Jody Loves Chachi or Better Call Saul. It's more of a spin-off in the same universe, which ironically is our universe, because it's just, it's Cold War basically, right? But this is, Energy Empire was all about stockpiling energy and having the best energy empire after the Cold War, right? Which leads us to Manhattan Project 2, Minutes to Midnight. Now this is a sequel to the original Manhattan Project game, which is a worker placement game all about building the nuclear weapons needed to end World War II, right? In the Pacific Theater. This one is a direct sequel. It's a standalone sequel, so you don't need the original. You don't even need to play the original, but it does have some aspects from the original and takes it and puts it into this game. So let's take a look now at Minion Games, Manhattan Project 2, Minutes to Midnight. So since there's so much to this game, it's a lot of table space taken up. Let's look at everything individually, kind of give you how it plays, an idea of how it plays. This is the building market. So these are where you get your buildings from. They're color coded by types. You've got your factories, your research labs, your reactors, ICBM silos, ABM launchers, and test sites. They all do different things to get you points or to strategically get you in a place to get points. You know, research lab, I really like. I'll tell you what that does in a minute when I show you the research technology board. But notice that there are different stack sizes in each one. This is supposed to be sitting right here. Basically what you do is you take all the tiles, you shuffle them face down, you make 3 equal stacks, and then you put one level across here, so whatever comes up, if you might have 4 factories here and only 2 here, kind of like this, you just put whatever comes up in the first stack on the top row, second stack in the second row, third stack in the third row. This it shows you 1 victory point per nuke detonated up to 7, and then 3 victory points during each scoring round if you have the most or are tied for the most with completed tests. So it's kind of an in-game scoring. A couple factory bonuses to remember. You can advance your sub or bomber if you do for the factory construction to get that. And then the other one is take 1 fighter squadron. So a couple different things just here on the building market. There's a couple more boards obviously that we need to look at first. This would be the actual worker assignment board here. It shows all the different spaces you can go, the different types of workers you have to go to these spaces, or what you get back when you retrieve. So when you do recruiting, you'll pull back, in education, you'll pull back the type of worker that you've set your worker above. So just know that that's kind of what that's all about, is you can put any type of worker here, and it can be converted into a politician, a general, or a spy even there. Remember, the game is worker retrieval, not so much worker placement. It also lets you adjust your worker track, which would be right down here at the bottom of your player board, how many workers you can have at any one time. You start with a certain amount, and then you could potentially have up to 15, depending on how well you do. Obviously, these are your building spots. We'll get here in a minute. You have taxation. This is just, you know, traditional type worker placement here. When you pull back from here, you get 3 coins and everybody gets 1. You get 2, you get 3, but it just shows you what you have to put there. So 2 politicians here, 1 politician there. Move 1 disc forward or behind in the third world nations track is what the United Nations is. It's a, now you'll notice this is upside down on the player boards on purpose, because you're meant to see this for everyone else. Like, your third world track is supposed to be visible to everyone else. So you're actually fighting for control of whatever third world country would be around, you know, kind of your main superpower type country. So this track will be a control thing, and you score victory points based on how many nukes you have in a third world country you control. This shows you the actions here that you could put a politician on this person's third world country board, and then when you remove it, you get to move these discs and arrange them to where you can have control or not, or remove someone else's control. So that's what that's all about. Down here you have military actions. You have, you know, proliferation. It says place a nuke onto your supply from each of your ICBM silos, and it just shows you how to do that. Military actions here, these are just the amount of military actions you can take based on the chevrons that are listed below. And we'll talk about what the military actions are in a minute. This is construct a building for free. And what that means is you pay the cost to go here. So it takes you a coin to go here. And when you pull, it takes you a coin to go here. But when you do it, you don't have to pay the cost of the building market, because when you place your workers, you can build a building based on whatever one you want to build it out of here with. So the factory builds submarines and bombers. You can see them pictured up here. Just tells you the cost, and it also gives you $1 from the general supply. You can choose 2 of the different actions. You can either take $1 or build a sub or build a bomber, or you can do 2 of those things twice. Then you have the research lab, which there's another board I need to show you. before we even get to there, the research lab, everybody will put their light bulb icons near each of these things, and wherever you are on these tracks is depending on where you are on these tracks, you can do certain things, you know. When it comes to your ICBMs, your reactors, your ABMs, you can place more nukes out, or you can get more. It just determines what you can do with each of one of these different types of buildings. So the higher the, or for this matter, military things, but the higher this track, the better and better the actions get. Obviously, victory points tracks around the outside. This is where you'll put the individual scoring tokens for the game itself. The different buildings, so that would be you move up on that track. Interesting thing, and we'll talk about it in a minute, if you use a spy on someone else's board, you actually use their technology number, not yours. So we'll talk about spies in a minute. Reactors, it produces a number of nukes equal to your reactor level. So that's what I'm talking about there. The ICBM silo, it can hold nukes that are ready for use, obviously with the test site. The test site is where you detonate your nukes to test your nuclear capabilities. You can actually, when you activate this, you detonate as many nukes as you have, up to 7, and you get a victory point per nuke. Then you'll flip it over, and that test site is over. So the more test sites you have, obviously, the more victory points you can get from that. ABM launchers can't have workers placed on them. They can't be activated. It just has to do with scoring. The more of those you have, the better when it comes to scoring. The different military actions would be deploy an aircraft, deploy subs, or sweep for subs, or move nukes overseas. Now, the overseas nukes would be, like I was talking about here, you putting your nukes up here in someone else's third world country track. And if you have control, they stay there. As soon as you lose control, they come off and go back to your supply. Back to the counter-espionage on the worker assignment board. So when someone places a spy, they're going to place it on your board, which is going to gum up your board, your actions. It's all, you know, based on your buildings and things, but it's also going to prevent you from using that space, but they get to use it with your numbers. So if you want to remove someone's spy from your board, you get to remove it with the counter-espionage action, and then you get to activate that building yourself. Down here, production, obviously you're making nukes based on what you have here. If you go here instead, though, you use a factory instead of making nuclear weapons. So it's just different options down there, ways you score in the game. So 3 victory points if you're among the players with the most detonated test sites. So obviously if you're in the higher end of that, it's more victory points for you. You get 7 victory points if there are not any enemy bombers in your airspace, and then 1 victory point for each nuke on your deployed bombers. So it's just about air superiority when it comes to that. There's nothing on the back here, I don't think. Yeah, it's the same thing. Over here, subs, when you score subs, 3 victory points if you're among the most. Still, that sort of thing happens. It says do this once, though, not for each event. So that's just kind of a final scoring thing. Reveal cards in all coastal waters. Return all revealed decoys to the general supply. 7 victory points if your ABM defense matches or exceeds the opponent's nukes in your coastal waters. So you need anti-ballistic missiles launchers. That's the whole point of having them. They're not good for anything but that. If you exceed it, you get 7 victory points, and then you get a nuke for each deployed, a point for each nuke on each deployed sub. ICBMs, you can read it here. 4 points for the ABM. If your ABM number matches the most ICBMs, it's a lot of initials, I know. 1 victory point for each of yours, 7 if you're among the players with the most, and then 4 if you're among the players with the second most. So it's kind of a tied deal there. Couldn't be first and second, I would imagine. 4 if your ABM matches or exceeds the nukes in the third world nation, 1 for each nuke in a nation that you control, and 3 for each nation that you control. So if you're playing a 2-player game, which you actually have to have a third nation board out there, you could potentially control all 3 nations. I do like the nice wooden disc that already came screen printed. You didn't have to put these stickers on them. That's very nice. The workers themselves look very good chunky pieces with that cute art style that is known for Manhattan Project. There are your sub cards right there, and then your planes are in there as well. And they're just the same as these kind of planes that I showed you, the bombers. You would put these in people's airplane areas, deploy the nukes on them, and that can hold 2. And then obviously you'll get more points at the end if you have, when that time the score comes up. So that's Minutes to Midnight there. It's basically not a worker placement game, it's more of a worker retrieval game, right? Because your actions actually take place in the order that you retrieve your workers, which is kind of neat, but it does tend to slow down your turn a little bit, but it's kind of neat in the fact that you're pulling your workers back to take the actions, to, you know, get more nuclear weapons, to move and manipulate those third world country boards, to get subs and take actions on your factories. Now you build buildings obviously in the placement phase, but you don't really use them until you pull your workers off of them. You know, multiple types of workers is always good, different types of workers that do different things. One thing I missed from Energy Empire though was the fact that you could stack those tokens, and whoever had the higher stack is who could go there. Now obviously this is a different game, different designer, different thinking behind it, but I did love that, where if you stacked energy under your token, and whoever had the highest stack, that's the person who got to go there, and if you wanted to go there next, you had to have a higher stack after them. So that was cool. This one does it in a different way in the fact that there are politicians, there's generals, there are workers and things like that. So it does it in a different way, but I like the fact that you're able to pull those workers back and take those actions in whatever order you want. So if you think strategically through your turn how you're going to pull back and get those actions out there done, especially since the scoring is varied, right? The scoring track is varied, so it depends if you're going to score third world or you're going to score, nukes or something, or subs or whatever, depending on where they are in the setup of the game. So that's an interesting fact to me, that the scoring is random, which could create problems because not problems, but it could create some interesting fact that your focus is shifted each time you play the game, right? You might think, well, obviously I've got to go after getting my third world track control into that, right? Well, what if that's the last scoring token? It won't really matter as much then if it's the last scoring marker. So you've got to kind of think through each one strategically in the few rounds in between each scoring track. So there's an interesting thing there. I like the art. The art's great in this game. I've always liked the Manhattan Project art. It's cool. Just the whole boards kind of look like a disheveled desk, of a general in the Cold War. So it's really cool in that sense. The art, it's different. It's a little bit more take that-y. It's got a lot more interactive elements of blocking other people's spaces with your spies and then having to take turns to remove those spies. So there's some of that involved. So it's a little bit more angry of a worker placement game than Energy Empire, which the only way to stop someone there is to just have more energy than them. But it's solid overall. It's like I said, I like Energy Empire better, but that is what Minutes to Midnight is all about. It's all about scoring through varied ways that changes each time you play. It's all about using your workers, strategically thinking when you're going to pull back. So that's Minute to Midnight. If you like that sort of thing, if that's your type of worker placement game, definitely go to Minion Games, check this game out. And for more reviews here on the Dice Tower, from me, I'm Brian Drake. Till next time, we'll see you.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching the Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.